Detective Elias Vance had barely 48 hours to unravel the most perplexing and cold-blooded crime in the history of Viridia, the calculated demise of tech mogul Julian Thorne, a man infamous for treating his vast wealth and endless stream of companions like disposable commodities. There were no smashed windows or signs of a scuffle, just a life extinguished in a luxurious penthouse and a web of inconsistencies that defied logic. For a figure like Julian, the roster of enemies spanned from betrayed investors to scorned partners, each possessing a formidable motive and a secret that screamed murder. Yet, nothing prepared the police for the brutal truth the forensic evidence would unveil. Because this wasn't an act of corporate malice or simple vengeance. What started as an inquiry into an unexpected passing rapidly transformed into a frantic hunt for a mercenary heart in human form. Welcome to Crime Thread, the channel where we dive deep into the darkness of human nature. Massive thanks to everyone who's liked and subscribed. You're the engine that drives this channel. Stick around for gripping, daily true crime sagas. And hey, if you haven't yet, you know the drill. Smash that subscribe button. Though the spotlight shines on the horrifying death of billionaire Julian Thorne in November 2029, the genesis of this tragedy truly lies 3 generations prior with Silas Thorne, the architect of the immense wealth Julian would ultimately inherit. Silas Thorne was born in 1945. He didn't come into the world with privileges. In reality, he was born into utter destitution. His parents struggled relentlessly. His mother worked grueling shifts as a laundress, and his father labored in the harsh Oresian mines. Silas spent his early years in a cramped, cinderblock shack with no modern amenities and only a meager corner to harbor his ambitions. He wasn't afforded the luxury of optimism. He had to force his own future into existence. From childhood, observing his father's constant hardship ignited an unyielding resolve within him. A resolve that thundered, "I will never be reduced to this existence." Every rising sun was a battle waged. Every coin earned was a hard-won triumph. By the time Silas reached his 20s, he understood that stagnation was not an option. He wasn't content merely surviving. He was hell-bent on flourishing. He took on any work he could find, starting by detailing vehicles, then moving on to refurbishing and selling electronics, rapidly mastering the art of negotiation and turning a tangible profit. By the late 1960s, he had painstakingly saved enough capital to begin acquiring and revitalizing small workshops and apartments, using nothing but raw determination and relentless drive to construct a modest fortune. But this was only the prelude. Silas envisioned something monumental. He wanted to build an edifice that time itself couldn't erode. In 1970, Silas met Ilara. She was an intimidatingly sharp woman, initially too shrewd for him perhaps, but he admired her sheer tenacity. She also hailed from a humble background, but she possessed a unique capability. She knew how to systematize, how to maximize every single cent, and most crucially, how to execute. They married swiftly, their shared aspirations aligning perfectly. Ilara was the kind of woman who would never permit her children to experience the bitterness of poverty. She understood that life transcended mere existence. It was about laying an indestructible foundation for the future. In the ensuing years, Silas and Ilara worked tirelessly as a unit. They expanded from property refurbishment to asset acquisition and management, eventually pivoting to monumental infrastructure deals that began to etch their name into history. Silas's deep-seated fear of his family, ever enduring the hardships he faced, fueled his every action. They weren't just creating a company, they were erecting a dynasty, a fortress designed to shelter his lineage for generations. However, the arrival of their first child, Anya, did little to satiate Silas's monumental hunger for accomplishment. Anya was a vibrant child, but for Silas, she was not the complete answer. They lacked a male heir, and he couldn't shake the conviction that the family legacy would remain incomplete without a son to carry its weight. He made it overtly clear that the family's destiny was intrinsically linked to a son. A son who would shoulder the tremendous responsibility of this burgeoning empire. Silas's fixation on ensuring the Thorne name's perpetuity became an obsession. He pushed himself harder. He expanded his holdings faster. And when whispers reached him of a sprawling tract of land in Viridia with unheard of potential, Silas didn't hesitate. He poured every last drop of his resources into buying it, certain it would permanently elevate his family's financial standing. Years passed, and the son still hadn't arrived. Silas's anxiety mounted. Elara endured 2 devastating miscarriages, and with each setback, Silas grew more desperate. His grand vision of legacy, of smoothly passing the company reins to a male successor, felt increasingly distant. He channeled every ounce of his energy into his work, but the thought of his empire someday being governed by a man never left his mind. Then, in 1975, after nearly a decade of waiting, Silas and Elara finally welcomed a son, Julian Thorne. His birth transcended a simple moment of happiness. It was the culmination of over a decade of Silas's relentless toil. This was the successor. His father's world was instantly, completely, his. Julian's arrival was celebrated like a royal accession in Silas's mind, as if the final, essential piece of a complex puzzle had finally clicked into place. Silas didn't just desire a son, he needed a son to fulfill the lifelong vision he had painstakingly built. Julian was born on May 12, 1975, in a quiet, exclusive maternity clinic. Elara, utterly spent but relieved, watched as Silas held the tiny infant. He murmured, "This is it, my boy. This is the dawn of something vaster than any of us." Silas's gaze never left the baby's face, as if attempting to transmit the colossal weight of his entire empire through that single, intense look. As a child, Julian was given everything imaginable: private tutors, specialized coaches, elite academies, and exotic vehicles long before he could legally drive. From a very early age, Julian was cultivated to perceive the world through a unique lens. He was taught that wealth wasn't merely a means to live comfortably, it was a potent tool for absolute command. By the time Julian turned 16, Silas had already been grooming him for life as the heir to the Thorne Empire. Silas's expectation for Julian was starkly clear: become the dominant force capable of managing the sheer magnitude of this empire and then some. Silas didn't just want Julian to be successful, he wanted him to be unassailable. This was the very bedrock Julian Thorne was born onto. This was the world that would sculpt him, one where money and influence were paramount, and concepts like affection, fidelity, and morality were often negotiable extras. As Julian would one day learn, everything he had been taught, everything his father had constructed, would become both his most formidable asset and his ultimate, fatal flaw. At a mere 18, Julian Thorne was accepted into a world-renowned university, a place where his reputation, self-assurance, and immense wealth cleared paths before he even set foot in a lecture hall. While his peers scrambled for grants or student loans, Julian walked in with an exclusive titanium card in his wallet and a surname that commanded immediate respect. His father, Silas, had meticulously prepared him for this environment, constantly pushing him to be more than just the heir. He was to be the undeniable figurehead of the dynasty. He majored in global market strategy and socio-economic behavior, a bespoke curriculum that blended finance, influence psychology, and high-stakes negotiation. It was an immaculate fit, a course engineered for those who knew how to game systems, manipulate crowds, and read every subtle cue in a room. But Julian's interests extended far beyond academics. His focus was perpetually fixed on the social landscape around him, and that world was rife with temptations. The campus was a veritable playground for the global elite, and Julian wasted zero time staking his claim. He swiftly became the gravitational center of exclusive campus gatherings, secretive social clubs, and high-end galas. His wealth and magnetic charm made him an instant draw for the women who frequented these circles. Women who sought not only the material luxury but the very aura of power that accompanied him. His initial casual liaisons were simply collateral damage of his high-flying existence. He'd meet them at packed clubs, private mansion parties, and aboard lavish yachts, places where status was the only currency that mattered. Julian, with his impeccably tailored suits and disarmingly smooth demeanor, quickly ascended to legendary status in those social strata. He was the man who could make any woman believe she was the sole person in his universe. Exorbitant gifts, spontaneous trips to far-flung destinations, and dining at Michelin-starred restaurants, he lavished his conquests with it all. But for him, it never eclipsed the pursuit of the next exhilarating rush. One weekend, he found himself hosting a party on a superyacht anchored off the coast of Monaco, surrounded by actresses, influential models, and high-society debutantes, all eager to bask in the radiant glow of his fortune. He was the pulsing heart of the event, the man everyone aspired to be near, and his reputation only intensified. One of his first major affairs was with a married, older socialite who was more than willing to abandon her husband for a taste of Julian's world. What good is unlimited money if you don't use it to seize exactly what you want? Julian once challenged her as they stood on the deck, sipping vintage champagne and gazing at the Viridian skyline. That night, they both took their pleasure, no complicated promises exchanged. His supreme confidence, coupled with his capacity to provide women with every desire, rendered him irresistible. He thrived in this deliberate chaos, managing his romantic entanglements like a series of profitable business transactions. Nothing, it seemed, could decelerate his momentum. His father, Silas, had always hammered home one cardinal rule: never conceive a child outside of marriage. Silas had indoctrinated this into Julian from the moment he could understand. It was the single, inviolable line Julian knew he must respect. But everything else? That was entirely up for grabs. The women, the influence, the lightning-fast cars, the endless nights, it was all intrinsic to the game. It was fundamentally who Julian was morphing into. Silas had demonstrated that control was the ultimate power. But Julian had pushed that principle to an extreme. He wasn't just traversing the world, he was asserting ownership over it. One epic party, one enthralling woman, one magnificent yacht at a time. By the time he received his degree, Julian's renown as a wealthy, unapologetic womanizer was firmly cemented. He wasn't merely the trust fund kid with a powerful surname. He was a man who could obtain anything he wanted, and consistently did. His life was a symphony of self-indulgence, calculated extravagance, and a revolving door of women who served as little more than fleeting entertainment for the man who genuinely believed he could command everything. And for Julian, there were no true limitations save the one his father had established. Everything else was wide open for exploration. He had an empire awaiting his command. But first, he had a legend to build, a legend that would persist long after he left university and stepped into the real world, a world he was fully ready to conquer. And with every conquest, every infamous party, every clandestine affair, Julian moved inexorably closer to embodying the man he was destined to be. A man whose name would be synonymous with gold, even if it came at the expense of every soul surrounding him. But there would inevitably come a breaking point when the collateral damage of his actions would demand retribution. There would be a moment when the total control he thought he possessed would start to disintegrate, and he would discover far too late that not every single thing in life can be purchased. As we delve deeper into the terrifying particulars of this investigation, please remember to tap that like button if you're finding this story compelling. The Thorne family, despite their monumental influence and staggering wealth, were not immune to life's most arbitrary cruelties. Silas Thorne had dedicated his entire existence to building what he proudly termed the dynasty. But all it took was a torrential downpour on an isolated stretch of highway just outside New Dublin, Ireland, to irrevocably change everything. Silas, the ferocious, driving force behind the family's fortune, was instantly killed in a horrific highway collision. The rain had turned the asphalt into a sheet of glass. Silas's high-performance car hydroplaned violently, slamming into a reinforced median barrier, and he perished immediately. His son, Julian, was precisely 33 years old when the devastating call came through. The man who had been meticulously raised under Silas's rigid gaze, learning the mechanics of managing the family's billions, now stood on the precipice of something far grander than he had ever conceived. He was, instantaneously, the supreme head of an empire. The inheritance was staggering. Massive real estate portfolios, subsidiary corporations, and investments valued in the tens of billions, all placed squarely and solely into Julian's hands. He inherited every single thing: the vast enterprise, the multiple mansions, the private jet fleet, the luxury vehicles, and the controlling interest in a multi-generational legacy. But the passing of Silas Thorne, for all its emotional wreckage, heralded the genesis of a new epoch. Julian's epoch. Initially, the transition appeared flawless. Armed with his degree in global market strategy and socio-economic behavior, he had no need to reinvent the foundation. He already possessed the innate knowledge of how to accelerate his father's creation. Under Julian's command, the empire expanded even further, and at an accelerated pace. He leveraged his razor-sharp intellect and the sheer brute force of his inheritance to absorb competitors, engage in high-risk ventures that others wouldn't dare touch, and fundamentally solidify his ironclad grip over the family's holdings. The corporate world watched in utter disbelief as Julian Thorne stepped seamlessly into his father's immense shoes without so much as a stumble. But with this abrupt, absolute power came a new, more dangerous kind of freedom, one that would unleash a far more predatory, darker aspect of Julian's personality. As the months turned into years, the man who had inherited a fortune began to exploit and indulge in it with increasingly reckless abandon. Julian chased after excess in its most extreme forms. His parties became the stuff of legend. Private air transport, sprawling palatial estates in Santorini, and members-only clubs where he rubbed shoulders with the world's most powerful figures. The women who populated these hedonistic gatherings were just as extravagant. Supermodels, reality stars, powerful executives, and even high society wives all gravitated towards him. They were drawn not just by his unlimited wealth but by the raw, untamed power and supreme confidence he exuded. Julian didn't simply live in luxury, he positively bathed in it. He began to boast privately to his inner circle that he had been intimate with over 4,000 women, a claim he repeated so frequently that it effectively became part of his public identity. For him, it wasn't about the women themselves. It was about the sheer, undeniable power he wielded over them. The media, forever starved for the next sensational story, quickly caught on, christening him Viridia's Lord of Lust. It wasn't just a catchy headline. It became a permanent part of his personal brand, a flag of his unbridled craving for dominance and endless indulgence. Despite all this, there were a few individuals who dared to question him, most notably his longtime friend, Marcus Holt. Marcus, also the successor to a vast family fortune, was the precise opposite of Julian. Where Julian was loud and audacious, Marcus was thoughtful and reserved. Their bond, forged during the very nascent stages of Julian's rise, was rooted in mutual, if strained, respect. But it was clear that Marcus fundamentally disagreed with Julian's life philosophy. One late evening, as they sat on Julian's panoramic balcony overlooking the glittering city, Marcus could no longer hold his tongue. "Jules," he began, his voice laced with genuine concern. "Why not just commit to a single person? Someone who could truly cherish you, fulfill your emotional needs, and make life a little less complicated." Julian, casually reclined in his outdoor lounge chair with a single malt scotch in hand, simply laughed it off. "You know what happens to men like us after a nasty divorce, Marcus," he shot back. His tone was flat, almost mechanical, as if he had rehearsed this precise defense 1,000 times. "Half the company, man. Half of everything I've built. I'm not risking that kind of catastrophe." Marcus furrowed his brow, leaning forward slightly. "But what's the ultimate purpose of all this, Jules?" he pressed. "All the billions, the endless parade of women, the notoriety? What is it all worth if you can't genuinely trust a soul?" Julian didn't reply immediately. His eyes drifted towards the infinite constellations of city lights below. For a prolonged moment, there was a palpable tension in the night air. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice unervingly steady. "You see, Marcus," he stated, "trust becomes irrelevant when you possess everything. You don't require anyone but yourself to command this world. I've witnessed the fate of men who shackle themselves. They lose their edge. They lose it all." Marcus shook his head slowly, disappointed, yet unsurprised. Julian had always operated under the doctrine that control was absolute, and his paralyzing fear of relinquishing it was what prevented him from ever truly settling down. The man who owned everything was petrified of what might slip through his grasp if he allowed a genuine connection. He deliberately surrounded himself with people who admired him, yes, but who also instinctively knew their place. Julian didn't crave love. He demanded loyalty, loyalty that could be purchased, meticulously managed, and kept at a safe, impersonal distance. But this unquenchable thirst for absolute control and continuous excess would eventually extract a hefty toll. His reckless expenditure, his constant quest for gratification, and his staunch refusal to commit would inadvertently set the stage for a shattering downfall that no amount of money could avert. The empire Julian inherited was vast and impenetrable. But as he was about to discover, ultimate power comes with an ultimate price, one that even his billions couldn't negotiate him out of. Before we proceed, thank you again for your presence and for supporting the tireless work of this channel. It truly is the foundation of everything we do. Our global community continues to expand exponentially thanks to incredible viewers like you. When you become a YouTube member, you gain access to exclusive content, behind-the-scenes insights, and help us continue generating potent, deeply researched stories like this one. Your backing genuinely changes everything. We'd love to connect with you. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always incredible to see people from every corner of the globe converging over these complex true crime narratives. Thus far, this narrative has been laser-focused on Julian Thorne, the billionaire whose dynasty was built on an edifice of power, limitless wealth, and self-indulgence. But there remains another crucial figure whose role was indispensable in the ensuing, horrific events. A woman who projected an image of perfect, almost fragile innocence. Yet, beneath that carefully constructed facade lay a disturbing history of calculated manipulation, self-preservation, and profound deceit. Her name was Vera Silas. Born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, Vera's childhood was anything but idyllic. Her father, a man consumed by his own destructive tendencies, sexually assaulted her at the tender age of 12. This was a profound violation no child should ever endure. Yet, it was merely the dark prelude to her painful reality. Her mother, utterly consumed by a spiraling narcotic addiction, was too lost in her own despair to offer any protection. Vera, a young girl frantically seeking refuge, found none. By the age of 14, she was forcibly removed from her home and placed into the state's protection. But even that temporary stability dissolved quickly. At 16, Vera fled the system, having lost all trust in the very institution meant to shield her. Existing on the harsh streets, Vera had no option but to rely on primal survival instincts. Without family or a permanent address, she began working as a dancer in local, seedy venues to make meager ends meet. The men she encountered were often seeking something illicit, something Vera swiftly learned to capitalize on. She didn't just dance, she evolved into the singular object of their fantasies, expertly playing the role that sheer survival demanded. By 18, Vera had transitioned into a new, more lucrative world, one that would shape her destiny for years to come. She became a high-end exotic performer, working at exclusive, darkened clubs where exceptionally wealthy men came to disconnect from their lives. Surrounded by opulent excess, it was here, in the secluded backrooms of Rio's nightlife, that Vera ruthlessly sharpened her manipulative abilities. She learned to instinctively read men, to understand their profoundest desires, and how to deliver precisely that, without ever revealing the profound internal darkness that had defined her own life. By 21, she had become a master artist of deception. She knew exactly how to make a man feel like the most important person in the building, how to feign the exact persona they yearned for without ever exposing the wounded truth of her past. When she met Julian Thorne, she immediately recognized a monumental opportunity. Just another man she could control. Just another life she could seamlessly infiltrate. Julian was a man who believed he had experienced everything. The world, the women, the power. He possessed everything most people only dream of. Yet, there was an inexplicable quality about Vera that snagged his attention. She was distinct from the others. She didn't pursue him for his net worth, at least not in an obvious way. She was softly spoken, appeared genuinely unassuming, and possessed a high degree of subtle emotional intelligence. Her allure was understated yet profoundly effective, and it was sufficient to keep him utterly captivated. Julian found himself drawn to her, mesmerized by her tranquil demeanor and seemingly placid presence. She seemed different from the constant stream of women who perpetually surrounded him. She never overtly demanded anything. She didn't appear to need his money. What she did do, however, was flawlessly reflect his deepest, most profound need for validation. She made him feel like the most essential man in the room, as if every accomplishment in his life held genuine meaning to someone who truly saw and understood him. What Julian failed to realize, however, was that this soft-spoken woman was expertly concealing a backstory darker and more sinister than he could ever comprehend. Vera's shattered past wasn't something she shared openly. It was a secret she meticulously guarded behind a facade of gentle innocence. She instinctively knew that Julian, a man who owned everything yet perhaps never found anyone to truly trust, required someone who appeared utterly genuine, someone who would make him feel distinct in a world where every single interaction was transactional. Vera gave him exactly that. She mirrored his unvoiced desires back to him, positioning herself as the ideal woman for a man like Julian, a man accustomed to people wanting something from him, but who rarely dared to ask for more than he was willing to dispense. She performed her role with flawless precision, revealing only what he was predisposed to see. Julian, in turn, was completely charmed. He never questioned her history, never pressed for personal details. All he saw was a woman who seemed sincere, kind, and genuinely eager to be in his presence. She seemed like the one person who wouldn't betray him, who wouldn't capitalize on his wealth or power. And in a world where trust was a severely depleted commodity, that was more than enough. She was the missing piece he needed, and Julian couldn't have been more irrevocably taken by her. Little did he know, this woman, this seemingly innocent, soft-spoken woman, was executing a predatory game as ancient as time itself. Julian Thorne was a man who, for the vast majority of his life, had never once entertained the prospect of marriage. He didn't require a wife to stabilize him, to introduce further complications. He was perfectly content, or so he convinced himself. But then, something profoundly shifted. Following their initial encounter, Julian found his thoughts constantly returning to Vera. It wasn't merely her striking appearance, her soothing voice, the gentle way she laughed, or the warmth she projected. It was the feeling she evoked in him. For the first time in decades, he didn't feel obligated to be the impenetrable empire builder around her. With Vera, he could simply exist. So, Julian began extending invitations, secluded dinners, private cruises on his newest yacht, and intimate house gatherings. They began spending increasing amounts of time together, deliberately shielded from the public eye. The more time elapsed, the deeper their connection grew. It rapidly evolved beyond mere physical attraction. It became emotional intimacy, something Julian hadn't realized he was desperately craving. He found himself anticipating their conversations, captivated by her sharp mind and emotional depth. Vera, for her part, continued to execute her role flawlessly. She never once seemed visibly impressed by his enormous wealth or his high status. Instead, she consistently made him feel as if he truly mattered. It wasn't long before they became utterly inseparable. For Julian, it felt like something he had been missing for years, a connection that transcended a fleeting affair or a business transaction. He was deeply unfamiliar with it, but with Vera, he began to believe in the possibility of genuine feeling. He had always maintained an emotional distance, perpetually fearful of being exploited or betrayed. But Vera's perceived sincerity, whether actual or entirely manufactured, was powerful enough to pull him in completely. For the very first time in my life, Julian would later confess to his close friend Marcus Holt, I feel like someone loves me for me. The words felt alien, even as they left his lips. But deep down, Julian knew it was the truth. He wasn't simply seeking a companion. He was seeking someone who could truly see him, not the billionaire, not the relentless businessman, but the vulnerable man hidden behind the prestigious title. And Vera had achieved precisely that. Within an astonishing 2 months, Julian was absolutely certain that Vera was the one. It was as if every piece of his life had perfectly fallen into alignment. He wasted no time. He proposed to her with a spectacle worthy of his name. He organized a staggeringly lavish dinner at a private villa perched high above the coastline, surrounded by shimmering crystal, a live string orchestra, and the most exquisite cuisine money could buy. He could have chosen a more private, understated setting, but Julian wanted the world to witness it. To the public, it was an irresistible spectacle, a tech magnate in his late 70s getting engaged to a woman less than half his age. The media had a field day, speculating wildly on the true motivations behind their whirlwind romance. Was it true love, or was something far more transactional at play? To Julian's closest associates, the union smelled like a disaster on a timetable. His longtime friend, Marcus Holt, was the first to vocalize his profound apprehension. "Jules, you've spent your entire life circumventing this." Marcus's voice was thick with sincere alarm. "You are fundamentally not the marrying type. Why now? Do you really know who this woman is? I've seen this exact movie before. It never, ever ends well." Julian, however, was resolute. He dismissed Marcus's warnings with a casual wave and a dismissive laugh, treating the concerns as utter nonsense. "I know exactly what I'm doing," Julian retorted confidently. "Vera is different. She's not like the rest." But Marcus, ever the rational voice, remained unconvinced. "They're all different," he countered grimly, "until they're not." Despite the dire warnings, Julian's mind was made up. He had discovered someone who made him feel truly vital again. Someone who made him genuinely believe in the potential of authentic, lasting love. For Julian, the future felt vividly bright. Bright enough that he was completely willing to ignore the persistent, unsettling doubts that lingered in the deepest recesses of his mind. Little did he know, the very traits that had originally attracted him to Vera, her subtle charm, her projected innocence, would soon become the primary catalyst for his swift and devastating downfall. The wedding of Julian Thorne and Vera Silas was a performance of unprecedented spectacle. The date was set for December 2028, and from the moment the extravagant invitations were dispatched, the entire world was watching. Julian Thorne, the legendary billionaire, and his bride-to-be Vera, had become the only thing anyone in high society could talk about. But the sheer grandeur of the day belonged not just to the breathless headlines. It belonged entirely to them. The chosen venue, an internationally famous coastal estate in Lisbon, was the immaculate backdrop for this over-the-top affair. Every single detail was executed with maniacal precision, from the complex floral installations to the massive crystal chandeliers that glittered with the soft evening light. The guests, international celebrities, business titans, political figures, and the absolute elite of society, filled the enormous hall, murmuring in awe at the sheer opulence surrounding them. But none of that mattered to Julian as he stood awaiting her at the altar, his heart hammering with a foreign sense of excitement. This was his definitive moment. Vera, in stark contrast, was the perfect embodiment of flawless composure. She floated down the aisle in a bespoke gown, the fabric shimmering under the ambient lighting, her face radiating a controlled joy. It wasn't only her stunning beauty that held everyone captive. It was the way she gazed at Julian, her eyes filled with an expertly calibrated mix of admiration and warmth. For Julian, this was more than a marriage. It was a potent declaration of everything he had strived for. In Vera, he felt he had found someone who genuinely loved him, not for his billions or his status, but for the man he believed he was. As she took his hand at the altar, he could barely contain his feeling of incredible luck. She had quickly become his entire world. And today, in front of all those powerful witnesses, she had promised to stand by him for eternity. The vows were direct, emotionally charged, and full of intoxicating promise. Julian, with his naturally deep voice and unwavering self-confidence, spoke of his profound love for Vera, and how she had introduced a new, vital light into his otherwise transactional life. Vera, in reply, spoke softly, her voice filled with a perfect sincerity, trembling ever so slightly with manufactured emotion. It was the dawn of an entirely new chapter for both of them. For Julian, it felt like a dream finally realized. Finally, someone who understood him, someone who made him feel whole. For Vera, it was the ultimate culmination of everything she had worked for, a life of unimaginable luxury, permanent power, and the absolute security she had always ruthlessly craved. As the ceremony concluded and the guests mingled, The newlyweds exchanged dazzling smiles, their apparent love for each other clear in every glance. The reception was every bit as extravagant, with fine wine flowing freely, and the expansive dance floor packed with laughter and unbridled joy. Julian and Vera danced together, their movements in flawless sync, their eyes locked in a silent, meaningful exchange. It was a moment of pure, blinding bliss, a moment where nothing else mattered but the shared connection they projected. Julian had never felt this level of happiness. For the first time in decades, he felt truly complete. And Vera, who had so meticulously crafted her persona, was now the woman he intended to spend the rest of his life with. The honeymoon that followed was nothing short of a surreal fantasy. The couple immediately boarded Julian's private jet bound for the remote Maldives, where they settled into a secluded, futuristic villa far from the invasive gaze of the public. The villa, dramatically situated on a cliff face with unparalleled ocean views, offered them the absolute perfect sanctuary. Julian, perpetually the businessman, found solace in the privacy, and Vera, always the perfect partner, ensured every moment felt utterly unique. They spent their days lounging near the infinity pool, simply enjoying each other's silent company, and their evenings dining in isolation under the celestial dome. To any outside observer, they were the quintessential perfect couple, blissful, deeply content, and madly in love. As the days blended together, the couple's bond seemingly deepened. Vera continued to execute her role flawlessly, making Julian feel like the most important man on the planet. And to the watching outside world, it looked like a union destined to last forever. The media, initially cynical, began to soften its narrative. They saw the intimate updates Vera shared on her social media, her radiant photos alongside Julian, each image painting a cohesive picture of an ideal marriage. People who had once viciously questioned their relationship now began to second-guess their prior assumptions. The public began to reluctantly believe it. Perhaps this wasn't just another aging rich man's reckless impulse. Maybe, just maybe, this was the real thing. Marcus Holt, Julian's longtime friend, couldn't help but notice the profound change in his friend. For years, Marcus had watched his friend deliberately dodge the complexities of love, actively avoiding commitment like a contagious disease. But now, Marcus saw a man who seemed authentically, unequivocally happy. One night, as they casually caught up over drinks, Marcus looked across the table at Julian, a warm smile spreading across his face. "You know, Jules," he admitted, "I've truly never seen you this content. This marriage, maybe it's the best thing for you. Look at everything you've been missing. This is what you've been searching for all along, isn't it?" Julian, his typical cockiness softened by the intimacy of the moment, nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, a look of profound contentment on his lips. "This is exactly what I've been waiting for." The happiness was undeniable. For Julian, this marriage was more than a simple union. It was the absolute realization of everything he had been striving for in his life. He had finally discovered someone who loved him for his essence. As the days continued, their bond only seemed to strengthen. Julian was no longer just the powerful billionaire who had everything. He was a man who had finally found love. For Vera, the future appeared equally brilliant. The life she had always meticulously mapped out was now indisputably hers, perfectly wrapped up in a marriage to one of the world's wealthiest and most powerful men. But as the idyllic honeymoon drew to its close, the critical question lingered: would this flawless union genuinely endure? Would their manufactured love withstand the inevitable test of time? Or would it fall victim to the very destructive forces that had shaped their disparate lives? It was now 2 months into Julian Thorne's marriage to Vera Silas. The newlyweds had settled into a predictable, luxurious rhythm, luxuriating in the opulence of their sprawling Lisbon private estate. Their days were filled with quiet, intimate moments, private chef-prepared dinners, and the kind of excessive indulgence Julian had been accustomed to for decades. But one tranquil afternoon, while they were relaxing near the estate's massive fountain, something entirely unexpected occurred, something that would critically set the stage for the deeply unsettling events yet to come. Julian called out to his beloved Rottweiler, Kilo. Kilo, who had been a loyal fixture at his side for over a decade, didn't respond with his usual spirited enthusiasm. Instead of bounding over, tail whipping the air, the large dog moved with a slow, debilitating sluggishness. There was an unnerving stiffness to his movements, an abnormality Julian couldn't immediately identify. "Kilo!" Julian called again, his voice now edged with sharp concern as he watched his dog visibly struggle to rise. Kilo, usually so boisterous and energetic, now looked lethargic and strangely distant. His coat, once thick and glossy, appeared dull. His characteristic spark was gone, replaced by a weary, almost blank gaze. It was a terrifying contrast to the companion Julian had known for so many years, a dog who was more than a pet, a true, unwavering constant in his chaotic life. Kilo had been with him through thick and thin, loyal and utterly consistent. He was Julian's anchor, a non-judgmental presence that never once wavered, no matter how turbulent his life became. Vera, observing Julian's worried frown, walked over to Kilo, kneeling gently beside the massive dog. She ran a comforting hand through his dense fur, attempting to reassure both Julian and the ailing animal. "He probably just caught a cold, Greg," she suggested softly, offering a perfectly reassuring smile. "I'll take him to the vet first thing tomorrow. I'm sure it's nothing at all." Julian nodded reluctantly, though he couldn't shake the chilling feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. He had shared his life with Kilo for over a decade, and he had never once seen the dog so weak, so detached. But trusting Vera's calm assessment, he pushed the profound worry aside for the moment. He desperately wanted to believe it was just a temporary illness, something a simple vet visit could easily rectify. The following morning, however, the truly unthinkable occurred. Julian woke to a silence unlike any other morning. He walked into the central living area and instantly knew something was terribly amiss. Kilo's oversized bed was empty. His heart plummeted. He rushed to the spot where his dog slept, only to find Kilo lying utterly still, utterly lifeless. The dog who had been his faithful companion for over 10 years was gone. Vera was standing nearby, her expression unsettlingly composed, though there was a controlled hint of sadness in her eyes. "Perhaps he was just old," she suggested softly, her voice flat, almost indifferent. "Dogs don't live forever, you know." Julian didn't respond immediately. He stood rigid, staring down at Kilo, the sheer weight of the loss crushing him. Kilo had been so much more than a pet. He had been a tangible, constant part of Julian's volatile world. To lose him so abruptly left a gaping hollow that Julian found impossible to ignore. But Vera's words, though simple and almost crude, seemed to offer the exact, detached comfort he required in that instant. He didn't challenge her assessment. Instead, he made the decision to bury Kilo deep on the estate grounds. It was the bare minimum he could do for the animal who had given him such devoted companionship for so long. As Julian quietly began the task of digging the grave, Vera remained placidly by his side, offering quiet, generic words of encouragement. She understood precisely how much Kilo had meant to Julian, and while her comfort was calm and composed, it felt profoundly mechanical. She was physically present, but her mind seemed elsewhere, never fully engaging in the true grief of the moment. She knew this was a necessary step, a loss that had served its clear purpose, something Julian would soon forget as he continued to navigate life, defined by the enormous wealth and unchecked power that had always been his currency. After Kilo was finally laid to rest, the opulent house fell into a profound silence. Julian took a brief moment to reflect on the dog's life, the loyalty, the profound, uncritical companionship Kilo had provided. It wasn't the ideal situation for Julian, but he wasn't a man who allowed himself to dwell on such inconvenient losses. He had too much on his plate, too many corporate responsibilities to allow this to slow him down. He trusted that Vera, ever the supportive partner, was there to gently guide him past it. He had married her for a reason, after all. She had made him feel genuinely loved and cared for, an emotional state he hadn't experienced in years. Her presence was strangely comforting, and as he stood silently beside Kilo's newly filled grave, he permitted himself the briefest sting of loss before resolutely moving on. "I'll be fine," Julian declared, his voice regaining its trademark steadiness as he rose from the dirt. Vera smiled up at him, her hand resting lightly and perfectly on his shoulder. "You always are," she replied softly. It was a minimal gesture of comfort, but in that pivotal moment, it was sufficient for Julian. He turned and walked back toward the mansion, with Vera following his lead. He hadn't suspected anything out of the ordinary. He wasn't trained to look for signs of betrayal. His laser focus was entirely on moving forward, on the dazzling future they were supposedly constructing together, the empire they were set to expand. But little did he know, this quiet moment of profound loss, the death of Kilo, was the definitive, low-key prelude to a much larger disintegration that would soon shake his entire existence to its core. It was a small event, seemingly utterly trivial in the grand narrative of his life. Yet, it perfectly set the stage for the dramatic, terrifying shift to come. 1 month following the death of Kilo, Julian's life seemed to have settled back into its normal, hyper-luxurious rhythm. The initial, dull ache of losing his dog had completely faded, replaced by the relentless demands of managing his colossal business empire and the requirements of his new married life with Vera. He buried himself in work, obsessively focusing on growing his already vast holdings and fully enjoying the excessive luxury his wealth provided. But despite the outward appearance of unbreakable stability, Julian couldn't quite shake the pervasive, unsettling feeling that something wasn't right with him. Over the last several weeks, he'd been experiencing an unusual, profound fatigue, a dull, nagging pressure in his chest that simply refused to subside. He initially dismissed it, attributing it to the non-stop stress of his hectic global schedule, but the feeling only intensified, growing sharper day by day. One evening, as Julian sat at his sprawling mahogany desk, his hand pressed instinctively against his chest in discomfort, Vera observed his unease. She had become incredibly adept at reading his subtle physical cues, understanding his shifting moods, and knowing precisely how to respond to his sudden needs. "You should genuinely take it easier, Jules," she said softly, her tone expertly laced with convincing concern as she approached him. "You've been pushing yourself relentlessly. Let me prepare your usual evening drink. It will help you fully unwind." Julian, despite his exhaustion, managed a grateful smile, appreciating her constant, professional attentiveness. "I'm truly fine, Vera. Just a little worn out, I think." "I'll be all right," he assured her, attempting to forcefully push the discomfort from his mind. Vera, however, insisted firmly. She knew exactly what he preferred, a powerful, high-end cocktail that he had ritualistically consumed for years. A simple, habitual drink, but it was the one thing that reliably allowed him to relax after an aggressively long workday. As she meticulously prepared the cocktail, her mind was elsewhere, calculating every subsequent step in her master plan with chilling, mathematical precision. She knew with absolute certainty that Julian trusted her, that he relied entirely on her to manage his comfort, and tonight she would do exactly that. She handed him the perfectly mixed drink, her fingertips intentionally brushing against his as she passed it over. He took a long, familiar sip, savoring the taste, and after a satisfying moment, settled back into his chair, exhaling with an audible sigh of relief. "You're right," he conceded, his voice distinctly softer now. "I just need a solid rest. It's been a monster of a day." With that, Julian rose and went to bed, the monumental weight of exhaustion pulling him inexorably under. He was completely unaware that the drink Vera had prepared for him contained something far more sinister and dangerous than he could have ever conceived. As he lay down, the tightness in his chest seemed to dissolve, and for the first time in days, he felt a welcome sense of profound, deep calm wash over him. But that calm was terrifyingly brief. As the hours slowly passed, Julian drifted into an unnatural, coma-like sleep, never to awaken again. The next morning, when Julian's alarm rang and he failed to move, Vera rushed to his side, shaking him violently, but he remained utterly unresponsive. Her hands visibly trembled as she reached for her phone, dialing emergency services with a carefully crafted sense of hysterical urgency. "Jules, please wake up," she screamed, her voice cracking with a manufactured mix of panic and desperation. "Please." Receiving no response, she made the 911 call. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but they were already too late. Julian was definitively gone. They attempted to resuscitate him, administering CPR and oxygen, but their efforts were futile. His powerful heart had ceased to beat. His body had simply shut down. And despite their best efforts, he was pronounced dead on the scene. Vera stood nearby, her hands clenched in front of her, crying hysterically, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. "Please, no. This can't be happening," she sobbed. But there was no response to her pleas. Julian Thorne, the billionaire whose empire spanned continents, was stone-cold dead. The news of Julian's immediate and sudden death sent shockwaves of disbelief through the city of Lisbon. How could someone so powerful, so incredibly vital, simply perish in the dead of night? It defied all sense and logic. And yet, here they were, standing over the remains of a man whose wealth and robust health had seemed to guarantee him an infinite lifespan, now cut tragically short without any clear explanation. Detective Elias Vance was immediately assigned as lead investigator. He arrived at the massive estate, his sharp, experienced eyes meticulously scanning the scene, taking in the serene, utterly untouched environment. There were no signs of violence, no forced entry. It bore absolutely no resemblance to a robbery or a break-in. The house was in perfect order, as immaculate as it always was. Julian's wealth had never been threatened in such a crude, external way. There was zero indication that anyone had physically entered the house to harm him. No signs of a struggle. Everything was too perfect. As he stood observing Julian's lifeless body, Elias couldn't shake the persistent, nagging feeling that there was a deeper narrative at play. A man like Julian, healthy and vibrant, didn't simply die in his sleep for no legitimate reason. He wasn't the type to pass away from natural causes without any prior warnings. His life had been one of extreme excess, but he wasn't the kind of man to let his personal health deteriorate unnoticed. Elias glanced quickly over at Vera, who was positioned quietly in the corner of the room, her eyes swollen and red from crying. "Miss Vera," Elias began, his voice calm but authoritative, "can you recount exactly what transpired here last night?" Vera looked up at Elias, her face a calculated picture of confusion and profound grief. "I truly don't know," she stammered, her voice shaking slightly. "He was fine. We had a drink and he simply went to bed. I never imagined there was anything wrong. He had been complaining of feeling a little tired lately, but he didn't mention anything remotely serious." Her voice cracked perfectly as she spoke, her hands nervously twisting together in apparent distress. I simply don't understand. Why did this happen to him?" Elias's eyes momentarily softened. He could discern the genuine-looking concern in Vera's eyes, but still, something didn't align. There were no clear answers yet. No immediate, obvious cause of death. But Elias knew the pending autopsy would reveal the truth. The central question remained: what precisely had happened to Julian Thorne on the night of his death? Why had a man so full of life and vigor suddenly and inexplicably passed away in his sleep? The answers were murky, but Elias knew one thing for absolute certain: the investigation had just begun. And whatever happened, whoever was involved, he was fully determined to find the truth. As the paramedics finally cleared the scene, Elias turned to his team. There was exponentially more to uncover, and he was absolutely resolved to get to the bottom of this. Julian's death was merely the opening chapter of a much larger, more complex story, one that would take him into spheres he hadn't yet imagined. The investigation into his death was nowhere near over. And as Elias walked away from the opulent estate, he couldn't shake the premonition that this case would lead him down a path full of unexpected twists, shocking turns, and dark revelations no one could have possibly anticipated. But then, something seemingly insignificant caught Detective Elias Vance's attention, something that had appeared utterly trivial at first, but now, with the unexpected, shocking death of Julian Thorne, seemed exponentially more significant. The prior death of Julian's dog, Kilo, a devoted, massive companion for over a decade, stood out sharply in Elias's mind. It had initially seemed like an unfortunate yet entirely natural event. According to Vera, when Elias had gently pressed her about Kilo's abrupt decline, she had maintained that the dog was simply old and possibly suffering from a common fever. He was probably just nearing the end of his life, Vera had calmly explained when Elias inquired about Kilo's prior condition. Maybe he caught a fever. I was going to take him to the vet the next day. But Vera's voice trailed off, her explanation sounding perfectly innocent and reasonable. But Elias was highly skeptical. Something about the entire situation felt intensely wrong, especially given how Julian had treated Kilo like a cherished family member. Elias, determined to meticulously leave no possibility unexplored, decided to contact the veterinarian who had last examined Kilo. The vet, who had recently treated Kilo just a few short months earlier, was utterly certain that Kilo had been in pristine health during his final visit. According to the vet's comprehensive records, Kilo's vitals were completely normal, and there was absolutely nothing alarming about his health status at that time. No fever, no indication of any illness. This was a dog who had been full of life just weeks before his sudden, mysterious decline. But why had Vera so adamantly insisted that Kilo had been sick? What had really transpired with him? With this profound inconsistency in mind, Elias requested that an immediate autopsy be performed on Kilo's body. However, there was a major logistical hurdle. Kilo had already been buried. The very notion of performing an autopsy on a dog who had been respectfully laid to rest presented its own unique set of challenges. But Elias was resolute. He knew that sometimes the crucial answers, no matter how unorthodox, were literally buried beneath the surface. He formally ordered the exhumation of Kilo's body, and with full authorization from local authorities, the dog was dug up once more. The results of the subsequent toxicology report sent a profound chill through Elias's entire being. Kilo's system showed distinct traces of highly toxic synthetic stimulants, poisonous compounds potent enough to have caused his sudden, final collapse. This was not a natural death. This was something far more calculated and sinister. And it raised a terrifying, glaring question. If Kilo had been poisoned, what devastating implications did that hold for Julian? Concurrently, Elias's dedicated team had begun meticulously sifting through Julian's exhaustive financial records, specifically looking for any unusual activity in the days immediately following his death. That's when they discovered a highly suspicious series of transactions. A swift transfer of 1.2 million euros from one of Julian's secure corporate accounts directly into Vera's personal account, executed within 48 hours of his passing. This was not the kind of transfer someone would make for a casual, minor purchase. This was a monumental sum of money moving rapidly in the immediate wake of Julian's untimely demise. Vera had always been tangentially involved in his finances, but this was a blaring, unmistakable red flag. The investigation didn't stop there. Elias's team also unearthed something even more damning: Vera's detailed online search history. It was utterly damning. Among the search queries, Elias found terrifying questions like, what powdered toxin kills silently? And how long do synthetic stimulants remain detectable in the bloodstream? The final, chilling search entry was, easy ways to poison a large dog? This was not the random search history of someone who had simply lost a beloved family pet. This was the calculated mind of a predator actively seeking the knowledge of how to inflict lethal harm on both human and animal. The picture was rapidly becoming crystal clear. Vera had researched methods to cause death, to end lives, and it seemed she had then acted on that perverse knowledge. Further detailed digging revealed even more unsettling evidence. Investigators located paperwork for Julian's substantial life insurance policy, where Vera was explicitly listed as the sole primary beneficiary. But there was a more profound layer to the deceit. The paperwork didn't just pertain to life insurance. It also revealed that Vera had taken proactive, meticulous steps to ensure she was legally positioned as the next of kin for Julian's sprawling estate, strategically positioning herself financially in the immediate wake of his death. In a final, crushing blow, an online order for several grams of the same synthetic stimulant compounds had been placed weeks prior to Julian's death. Compounds that precisely matched the substances found in the toxicological analysis of both Julian and Kilo. The final, indisputable nail in the coffin came when forensic investigators discovered a small pill bottle cap bearing Vera's clear fingerprints. It had been found in a domestic trash receptacle, discarded with a carelessness that seemed almost arrogantly deliberate. The bottle contained trace residue of the exact same stimulants that had been discovered in both Julian's system and Kilo's. Taken together, these disparate pieces of evidence formed an absolutely undeniable case. The massive financial transfers, the chilling search history, and the matching toxicology results. It all pointed to one single, cold-blooded person, Vera Silas. But even with the mountain of evidence relentlessly stacking up, there was still the perplexing matter of her overall demeanor. During her lengthy interrogation, Vera's composure oscillated dramatically between unsettling calm and explosive tears. At certain points, she was quiet, projecting vulnerability and profound distress. At other times, she was openly, hysterically sobbing, seemingly overwhelmed by genuine grief. But Detective Vance was not fooled. It was as if Vera had perfected the technique of hiding behind her tears, donning a convincing mask of profound emotional distress while ruthlessly concealing the cold, hard guilt simmering just beneath the surface. The arrest was a foregone conclusion. With the mounting, conclusive evidence, it was only a matter of time before Vera would face the full consequences of her ruthless actions. But what Elias still struggled to fully grasp was the underlying motive. What did Vera truly gain from this heinous act? The money, undeniably, was a major factor, but was there something deeper, something more psychologically twisted? What had ultimately driven her to murder not just Julian, but his faithful, loyal dog, Kilo? And what did this all mean for the eventual future of the titanic empire Julian had spent his life constructing? With the investigation still fully unfolding, Elias knew one critical thing. This case was far from closed. The final, complete answers were still out there, awaiting their revelation, and he was absolutely determined to find them all. The courtroom in Lisbon buzzed with palpable anticipation as Vera Silas's trial commenced, a public, global spectacle that immediately captured the world's attention. The billionaire bride poisoning case dominated every headline. The international press couldn't get enough of the story. A beautiful young woman, barely 30, married to a 77-year-old titan of industry, now definitively accused of meticulously poisoning him. The charges leveled against her seemed to perfectly align with the classic narrative of pure greed and ultimate betrayal. But it wasn't only the media that was deeply invested. The prosecution dramatically painted Vera as a sophisticated predator in designer attire, someone who leveraged her compelling beauty and manufactured innocence to manipulate Julian Thorne, a powerful man who had narcissistically believed he could buy every conceivable emotion. The case clearly laid out the devastating details: the highly suspicious death of Julian's dog Kilo, the immediate, large financial transfers from Julian's accounts to Vera's in the hours following his death, and the discovery of the deeply disturbing online searches Vera had conducted regarding various poisons and how to kill a dog. Vera's defense team, conversely, argued that her actions were the direct result of her deeply traumatic past, a childhood forever marred by sexual abuse at the hands of her father, and her drug-addicted mother who had failed in her fundamental duty to protect her. The defense constructed a picture of an emotionally fragile young woman, psychologically manipulated by Julian, who had ruthlessly exploited her vulnerable, damaged state. But the jury was not swayed by the defense's emotional arguments. The totality of the evidence was simply too damning. The pattern was glaringly clear: a definitive financial motive, a documented history of calculated manipulation, and the clear, irrefutable signs of lethal poisoning. This was not merely a vulnerable young woman who had been taken advantage of. This was a ruthless individual who had instead taken advantage of Julian, a man who had been tragically blinded by his own profound desires for manufactured affection and love. The jury deliberated for only a mercifully short time before delivering their unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. The courtroom fell into an immediate, deafening silence as the presiding judge prepared to deliver the sentence. The gavel slammed down with thunderous authority as the judge formally pronounced Vera's sentence: 85 years in a maximum security prison. Vera did not flinch or react. She stood entirely motionless, her expression chillingly cold and impassive as the sentence was read aloud. The woman who had once captivated a billionaire, becoming the ultimate center of his extravagant life, was now a convicted, infamous murderer. Her once adoring, captivated audience, the global public, had now turned their collective gaze upon her with stark judgment and contempt. There was no visible remorse, no spoken apology, only a detached, unnerving silence as Vera was calmly escorted out of the courtroom. For those few who had genuinely known Julian, the loss was absolutely devastating. But the damage inflicted didn't end with Vera's conviction. Julian's vast empire, which had once been the ultimate symbol of global success, was now structurally crumbling. Lawsuits and legal claims piled up instantly, and the business he had spent decades vigorously building was slowly, irrevocably unraveling. Investors pulled out their capital, and countless creditors came relentlessly knocking. The grand, excessive lifestyle he had constructed upon a foundation of self-indulgence and perpetual pleasure was now nothing more than a chilling cautionary tale. Marcus Holt, Julian's longtime friend, struggled immensely to fully come to terms with the senselessness of his death. "I never ever believed Vera was truly capable of killing him," Marcus mused one evening, sitting entirely alone in his immense office. "All of it for just money? Maybe it would have been profoundly better if he had never married at all. At least then, he wouldn't have ended up destroyed like this." Marcus's heartbroken words echoed the growing, widespread disillusionment of those who had once looked up to Julian. What had initially seemed like an exciting, whirlwind romance had violently metastasized into a horrific nightmare that absolutely no one had managed to foresee. With Julian permanently gone, his elderly sister, Anya Thorne, was far too advanced in age to assume control of the disintegrating empire. Now in her late 80s, Anya was in no practical position to manage the enormous wealth and business interests Julian had spent his life aggressively building. The crushing responsibility of overseeing the fractured empire was far too heavy for her. Instead, she made the difficult, decisive choice to formally transfer the majority bulk of the family business to someone more capable of effectively running it. Marcus Holt, Julian's longtime friend and trusted confidant. Marcus, despite his inherently reserved nature, possessed the necessary financial experience and deep understanding of the global business world to attempt to steer the company forward. While he was profoundly saddened by Julian's death, he instinctively knew that the empire could not simply be left in total disarray. But Anya didn't simply walk away from her brother's legacy entirely. She ensured that Julian's name would survive in a profoundly different, more meaningful way. Utilizing what little remained of the family's liquid wealth, Anya helped establish a charitable foundation in Julian's name, though its mission was pointedly not aimed at acquiring more wealth or continuing his corporate empire. This foundation would exclusively focus on raising urgent public awareness about the severe dangers of financial and elder exploitation and the absolute necessity of trust in relationships, issues that Julian himself had unknowingly, tragically fallen victim to. It was a means for her to transform her brother's catastrophic downfall into something genuinely meaningful, something that could actively help others avoid the exact same, fatal mistakes he had made. The dark, complex story of Julian Thorne is a devastating narrative about extreme wealth, unchecked indulgence, and, ultimately, the most profound betrayal. It is the story of a man who sincerely believed he could simply purchase genuine love, lasting happiness, and permanent security. But in the end, it was that very desperate pursuit of superficial desire that led directly to his undoing. He had once believed that immense wealth could solve all his problems, that it could somehow shield him from the darkness of loneliness. But in the final, brutal twist, it was love, the very kind of love he thought he had successfully bought, that brought him to his final, terrible death. His life and death leave us with potent, unsettling questions about the true cost of trust, the insatiable nature of desire, and the unimaginable lengths some people will go to in their search for validation and affection. Julian's story serves as a tragic, permanent reminder that while vast wealth can indeed purchase countless things, it can never purchase genuine, unmanipulated connection or fully shield us from the catastrophic consequences of our most self-serving actions. What is your take on this shocking crime story? Considering Julian lived an exceptionally reckless and promiscuous life, was the brutal fate that befell him, in a strange way, a form of karmic justice? Who do you think was the true genesis of the problem? Julian or his parents, who molded him with their obsession? Share your deepest thoughts and insights in the comments section below. Don't forget to officially join our True Crime family by subscribing to this channel and clicking that crucial notification bell so you absolutely never miss a new, captivating story.